"If your daughter can translate this, I'll double your salary," said the female millionaire CEO to the single father. "Before anything else, if this video finds you well, wherever you are, let me know how it made you feel at the end." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Michael Thompson clutched his daughter's medical report, his weathered hands trembling slightly. At 42, he'd seen his share of struggles, but nothing prepared him for this moment. 8-year-old Emma sat beside him in the sterile waiting room, her bright blue eyes focused on the ancient tablet he'd bought secondhand 3 months ago, their only window to the digital world that seemed to mock their circumstances every single day. "Daddy, what's that lady saying?" Emma whispered, pointing at the foreign subtitles flickering across the cracked screen. Michael's heart clenched. The neurologist had been clear. Emma's rare condition was progressing faster than anticipated. The experimental treatment in Switzerland cost more than he'd earn in 5 lifetimes, working double shifts at the warehouse. But there was something else. Something the doctor mentioned about Emma's extraordinary ability to understand patterns and languages despite her condition. The elevator chimed, and Victoria Ashford stepped out like she owned the building, which Michael realized with a start, she probably did. At 32, she commanded Ashford Enterprises with the same intensity that had made her the youngest female CEO in the Fortune 500. Her designer heels clicked against the marble floor as she approached the reception desk, her phone pressed to her ear, switching effortlessly between English, Mandarin, and what sounded like Portuguese. "The Brazilian contract is worthless if we can't decode their technical specifications," she snapped into the phone. "I've spent 6 months and $300,000 on translators who can't even grasp the cultural nuances embedded in their engineering documents." Michael watched, fascinated despite himself as this powerful woman gestured emphatically. Emma tugged at his sleeve. "She's frustrated, Daddy. The lady with the pretty shoes is really, really frustrated." Something in his daughter's tone made Michael look closer. Emma was studying Victoria with the same intense focus she applied to her tablet games, the ones where she consistently achieved impossible scores that made other parents question whether the device was broken. Victoria ended her call and noticed them watching. Her sharp green eyes softened slightly when they landed on Emma, but hardened again when she saw Michael's warehouse uniform and the duct tape holding his shoes together. "Excuse me," Victoria said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. "Your daughter, she was listening to my conversation." Michael instinctively moved protectively in front of Emma. "She doesn't understand Portuguese, ma'am. We were just waiting for the bus." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. "Portuguese? I was speaking Mandarin for the last 2 minutes." She knelt down to Emma's level, her expression shifting to something Michael couldn't quite read. "Sweetheart, what did you think I was talking about?" Emma looked up at her father for permission. Michael nodded reluctantly. "You were upset because the people you hired can't understand the hidden meanings in the documents. They know the words, but they don't know the feelings behind them. Like when Daddy says I'm fine, but his eyes say he's worried about something." Victoria's composure cracked for just a moment. She stood slowly, her gaze never leaving Emma's face. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Emma Thompson. I'm 8 3/4. And you understood what I was saying?" Emma nodded matter-of-factly. "You need someone who can read between the lines. The Brazilian engineers aren't just giving you technical specs. They're testing whether you respect their culture enough to understand their subtle warnings about implementation challenges." The waiting room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Victoria stared at Emma as if seeing a ghost, then looked up at Michael with an expression he'd never seen on another person's face, a mixture of desperation and hope that mirrored his own constant state. "Mr. Thompson," Victoria said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to make you an offer." Victoria's corner office occupied the entire 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of downtown Portland. Michael had never been this high in a building before, and the vertigo made his stomach lurch. Emma pressed her face against the glass, completely fearless. "The contract is worth $50 million, Victoria said, sliding a thick folder across her mahogany desk. "But it's written in technical Portuguese with cultural references that require not just translation, but interpretation. I've lost 3 potential deals this year because American translators miss the nuanced meanings." Michael flipped through pages of incomprehensible text mixed with engineering diagrams. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I don't understand why you're showing us this. Because your daughter understood my phone conversation better than linguists with doctorate degrees." Victoria pulled out her phone and showed them a recording. "This is a snippet of the Brazilian engineer explaining their water purification system. Listen." The Portuguese flowed like music, but Michael caught Emma's eyes widening as she focused intently on the screen. "He's not just explaining the system," Emma said quietly. "He's warning about the rainy season. He says the filtration works perfectly in their tests, but he's worried it might fail when the heavy rains come because they haven't tested it in real conditions. He's being polite, but he's basically saying your American engineers are rushing too much." Victoria's hands stilled on her phone. The American team projected a 6-month implementation timeline. "The Brazilian engineer thinks that's crazy," Emma continued. "He says it should take at least 18 months to do it right, but he's too polite to say that directly. That's why he keeps mentioning the seasonal challenges. It's his way of saying you need to slow down." Michael watched his daughter translate not just words but intentions, cultural context, and unspoken concerns. How had he never realized the depth of what Emma could do? "My daughter needs medical treatment," Michael said carefully. "Experimental therapy in Switzerland. It costs $200,000 and insurance won't cover it." Victoria leaned back in her leather chair, studying them both. If Emma can successfully translate this entire contract, not just the words but the cultural nuances, the implied concerns, the real timeline they're suggesting, "I'll double your current salary and provide full medical coverage for Emma's treatment." Michael's warehouse salary was $38,000 a year. Doubling it would be life-changing, but still nowhere near enough for Emma's treatment. That's very generous, but plus a bonus of $300,000 if the deal goes through successfully because of her translations. The office fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic 42 floors below. Michael felt like he was drowning and someone had just thrown him a life preserver, but he couldn't quite reach it. "She's 8 years old," he whispered. "She's extraordinary," Victoria replied. "The question is, are you willing to let her be?" Emma looked up from the contract pages she'd been studying. "Daddy, this isn't just about water purification. They want to build something that will help people in places where water makes children sick. Like my brain makes me sick, but different." Michael's throat constricted. Emma's condition was degenerative. Without treatment, she had maybe 2 years before the symptoms became unmanageable. But here she was, talking about helping other sick children. "If I can help," Emma said softly, "shouldn't I try?" Victoria's expression shifted to something Michael hadn't expected from a corporate executive: genuine emotion. "There's one more thing you should know," Victoria said. "This contract isn't just about money for me. My younger brother died from a preventable waterborne illness during a missionary trip to Brazil 5 years ago. He was Emma's age." The weight of that revelation settled over the room like a blanket. Michael realized they weren't just talking about a business deal anymore. "When do we start?" he asked. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical for Portland in late September. Michael had barely slept, alternating between excitement and terror about what they'd agreed to. Emma sat at their tiny kitchen table, the thick contract spread before her like a treasure map, her expression more serious than any 8-year-old should have to be. "The first section is about water quality standards," she said, tracing her finger along lines of Portuguese text. "But they keep using the word confiança. It means trust, but they're using it in a special way." Michael poured coffee into a chipped mug, watching his daughter work with an intensity that both amazed and worried him. "What kind of special way?" "They're saying they need to trust that the Americans will respect their environmental concerns. See here?" Emma pointed to a paragraph. "They mention the Amazon basin 6 times, but not because of water sources. They're worried about the impact on indigenous communities." His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "How's the translation progressing? Need anything?" Michael typed back. "Emma says they're concerned about indigenous communities." The response came immediately. "None of our environmental consultants mentioned that. What else?" Emma looked up from the document. "Daddy, this engineer, Senior Martinez, he's trying to tell them something important, but he's being very careful about how he says it." "What do you mean?" "He keeps mentioning his grandmother. At first I thought it was just nice stories, but he's talking about traditional water purification methods that indigenous people have used for centuries. He's trying to say that the new system should honor and incorporate those methods, not replace them." Michael stared at his daughter. How was she reading cultural subtleties that escaped professional translators? "There's more," Emma continued. "The timeline they keep discussing, 18 months, it's not just about engineering challenges. It's about getting approval from tribal leaders. That's why they can't rush it." Michael's phone rang. Victoria's name appeared on the cracked screen. "Michael, I need to see you both in my office immediately. I just got off a call with our Brazilian partners, and something Emma translated yesterday has changed everything." An hour later, they sat in Victoria's office while she paced behind her desk, her usual composure replaced by barely contained excitement. Your daughter's insight about the rainy season timeline was correct, Victoria said. But more importantly, she identified cultural concerns that could have killed the entire deal. Our American team was about to make a presentation that would have been seen as disrespectful to indigenous traditions. Emma sat quietly, listening with the same focused attention she gave to everything. The Brazilians want to video conference with Emma directly, Victoria continued. They're curious about this 8-year-old who understands their cultural nuances better than international consultants. Michael's protective instincts flared. I don't think, Daddy, Emma interrupted gently. If they want to talk to me, maybe I should listen. Sometimes people just want to know that someone else understands them. Victoria pulled up a video call interface on her large monitor. Within moments, 3 men appeared on screen. The lead engineer Martinez and 2 colleagues, sitting in what appeared to be a conference room with windows overlooking lush greenery. Hola, Emma, Martinez said in heavily accented English. I hear you understand our concerns about the water project. Emma smiled shyly. You're worried that the American engineers want to build something fast instead of something right. And you're worried they don't understand that water is sacred to your grandmother's people. Martinez's eyes widened. He spoke rapidly to his colleagues in Portuguese, then looked back at Emma. You understood this from our technical documents? You love your grandmother very much, Emma said simply. When people write about someone they love, their feelings show through their words even in different languages. Martinez was quiet for a long moment, then smiled broadly. Emma, would you be willing to help us explain our concerns to the American engineering team? Not as a translator, but as someone who understands hearts as well as words? Michael watched his daughter consider this request with the gravity of someone much older. I think, Emma said carefully, that everyone wants the water system to work and to help people. Maybe I can help everyone understand each other better. Victoria's phone started ringing with what Michael could see were multiple incoming calls. The deal just became much more complicated, Victoria murmured, but she was smiling. The conference room at Ashford Enterprises had been transformed into a war room. Charts covered the walls, laptops hummed on every surface, and coffee cups created rings on the mahogany table. Michael sat in the corner, feeling completely out of place among the engineers, lawyers, and executives who'd flown in from across the country. Emma occupied the head of the table, a stack of translated documents before her, speaking with an authority that made grown men lean forward to catch every word. The Brazilian team isn't being difficult, she explained to the American engineers. They're trying to save us from making a mistake that would cost millions of dollars and hurt people who depend on clean water. James Bradley, the lead American engineer, frowned at his tablet. But their proposed timeline would delay implementation by over a year. People are dying from contaminated water while we debate cultural sensitivities. Emma's expression grew thoughtful. Senior Martinez lost his baby sister to bad water when he was 12. That's why he became an engineer. He's not trying to delay helping people. He's trying to make sure we help them the right way. The room fell silent. Victoria looked at the video conference screen where Martinez and his team waited. Martinez, Victoria said. Emma says you lost your sister to contaminated water, is that correct? Martinez nodded slowly. Maria, she was 3 years old. Our village had a water purification system installed by foreign contractors. It worked for 6 months, then failed during the rainy season. The contractors had already left and we had no way to repair it. James Bradley's frown deepened. We've accounted for seasonal variations in our design. Have you accounted for maintenance training? Emma asked quietly. Senior Martinez keeps mentioning his uncle Carlos, who learned to fix the old system when the foreigners left. He's not just an uncle. He's the person the village depends on when technology breaks. She flipped through several pages of her translation notes. The Brazilians want Carlos and people like him to understand how the new system works before it's installed. That's part of the 18-month timeline, teaching local people to maintain it themselves. Victoria leaned forward. Martinez, is this correct? Emma understands perfectly, Martinez replied. We need sustainable solutions, not just advanced technology. The extra time is for community integration and training. Michael watched his daughter facilitate a discussion between engineers who'd spent years in their respective fields. How was she bridging gaps that had stumped professionals? There's something else, Emma said, looking directly at James Bradley. You designed the system to process 10,000 gallons per day, but Senior Martinez's calculations show they need 15,000 gallons during dry season when neighboring villages share the water source. James Bradley pulled up his engineering specs. Our demographic data showed peak usage at 8,000 gallons. Emma shook her head. Senior Martinez says during drought, people walk for miles to reach clean water sources. The usage isn't just for the immediate community. Martinez nodded emphatically. Emma is correct. During dry season, our facility serves 7 villages, not just one. The American engineering team huddled around Bradley's laptop, recalculating their projections. Victoria's phone buzzed with another call, but she ignored it, focused entirely on the discussion. If we increase capacity by 50% and extend the timeline for community training, Bradley said slowly, we're looking at significant cost overruns. But also at a system that actually works long-term, Victoria replied. Emma, what does Martinez think about cost concerns? Emma consulted her notes. He says Brazilian labor costs are lower than American estimates, and local materials are more available than your suppliers indicated. The extra capacity might not cost as much as you think. Martinez smiled. Emma reads not just our words but our solutions. We have proposal for cost-effective modifications. Over the next 2 hours, Emma helped negotiate a modified contract that addressed American timeline concerns, while respecting Brazilian cultural requirements. Michael watched his daughter transform what had been an impasse into a collaboration. Gentlemen, Victoria finally said, I think we have the framework for a successful partnership. As the video call ended and the engineering teams began detailed planning, Victoria approached Michael. Your daughter just saved a $50 million deal and potentially thousands of lives. But more than that, she's shown us how to build something that will actually work. Michael looked at Emma, who was quietly organizing her translation notes with the same methodical care she applied to everything. She's always been special, he said softly. I just never knew how special until now. 3 weeks into the project, Emma's medical symptoms began worsening. Michael found her collapsed in the bathroom at 3 a.m., disoriented and struggling to form coherent sentences, the terrifying episodes that signaled her condition's progression. By morning, she seemed normal again, but Michael knew they were running out of time. Victoria noticed immediately when they arrived at her office. Emma's usual bright energy seemed dimmed, her responses slightly delayed. Maybe we should postpone today's session, Victoria suggested gently. Emma shook her head firmly. The Brazilian team is waiting for my translation of the environmental impact section. Senior Martinez says it's the most important part. Michael watched his daughter force herself to concentrate on documents that would have challenged healthy adults. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned pages, but her voice remained steady as she read. They're worried about something they're not saying directly, Emma said after reviewing several pages. They keep mentioning future generations and irreversible consequences, but they're being very polite about it. Victoria leaned forward. What kind of consequences? Emma traced her finger along a paragraph of Portuguese text. There's a rare bird that only nests near the proposed water facility location. Senior Martinez's daughter, she's a biologist. She wrote this section. She's trying to say that if we disturb the nesting area, these birds might disappear forever. Michael felt a chill. Emma's ability to read between cultural lines was remarkable, but extracting specific technical concerns from complex documents while battling neurological symptoms seemed impossible. How can you be sure about the daughter? Victoria asked. Emma smiled weakly. The writing style changes in this section. It's more scientific but also more passionate. And look, she mentions her papa's wisdom about respecting nature. That's how daughters write about fathers they admire. Victoria's phone rang. Martinez's name appeared on the screen. Senior Martinez, Victoria answered on speaker. Emma has been reviewing the environmental section. Ah, yes. My daughter Isabella wrote that section. She is, how do you say, very concerned about the wildlife impact. Emma straightened despite her fatigue. Tell Isabella that we understand about the birds. Could the facility be moved 300 meters south? The water access would be the same, but the birds could keep their nesting area. There was silence on the call, then rapid Portuguese conversation in the background. Isabella says 300 meters south would be perfect. She is amazed that someone understood her concerns so clearly. After the call ended, Victoria studied Emma with growing concern. Sweetheart, you look exhausted. I'm okay, Emma said, but her voice lacked conviction. Michael made a decision he'd been avoiding. Victoria, I need to be honest about Emma's condition. She has episodes where she becomes disoriented. They're getting worse, and without treatment. He couldn't finish the sentence. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. How long do we have? The Swiss clinic says we need to begin treatment within 6 weeks or the damage might be irreversible. Then we finish this project in 5 weeks, Victoria said firmly. I'm advancing you the medical treatment money immediately. Michael stared at her. But the contract says payment upon completion. The contract doesn't account for saving a little girl's life, Victoria interrupted. Besides, Emma has already earned it. Her cultural insights have prevented 3 potential diplomatic disasters and identified cost-saving modifications worth $2 million. Emma looked up from her documents. If I go to Switzerland for treatment, I won't be here to help with the final negotiations. Victoria knelt beside Emma's chair. Sweetheart, the most important thing is making sure you get better. But Senior Martinez and his team are counting on me. And what about the people who need clean water? Michael felt his heart breaking. Even facing her own medical crisis, Emma was worried about others. We'll figure it out, Victoria said softly. The Brazilian team understands that you're not well. They're grateful for everything you've already done. Emma was quiet for several minutes, studying the contract pages spread before her. I want to finish, she said finally. I want to make sure the water system gets built right so no more little sisters die like Senior Martinez's sister Maria. Michael looked at Victoria, seeing his own emotions reflected in her eyes. Admiration, worry, and a desperate hope that somehow they could save this extraordinary little girl who cared more about others than herself. We'll do whatever it takes, Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. Outside the office windows, Portland's autumn rain began to fall, and Michael couldn't help but think about how water could be both life and death, both hope and heartbreak. The Swiss clinic's acceptance letter arrived on a gray Tuesday morning while Emma worked on the final contract sections. Dr. Elizabeth Hoffman's email was clinical but encouraging. Emma's case showed promise for the new neural pathway treatment, but they needed to begin within 3 weeks. Michael stared at the treatment schedule. 3 weeks in Switzerland meant abandoning the Brazilian water project just as it reached its most critical phase. Daddy, what's wrong? Emma asked, looking up from her translation work. Before Michael could answer, Victoria's office door opened and she rushed in, her face flushed with excitement. The Brazilian government just approved our project for their national infrastructure program, she announced. It's going from 1 facility to potentially 50 locations across the country. But her excitement faded as she noticed Michael's expression. The Swiss clinic accepted Emma, Michael said quietly. We have to leave next week. Victoria sank into her chair. That's wonderful news about Emma's treatment. But the Brazilian team specifically requested that Emma oversee the cultural integration aspects of the expanded project. Emma set down her pen carefully. How many people would have clean water if the project expands? Conservative estimate? 200,000 people in the first phase. Emma was quiet for a long moment, then looked at her father with an expression far too mature for her 8 years. Daddy, what if we could do both? Michael shook his head immediately. Emma, your health comes first, always. But what if I could help the Brazilian team before I leave? Like translate the most important parts and create guidelines so they can work with other translators? Victoria leaned forward. What do you mean? Emma pulled out a notebook she'd been working in privately. I've been writing down patterns. Like when Senior Martinez is worried about something, he uses certain phrases. When Isabella writes about environmental concerns, she has specific ways of being polite but firm. If I document all these patterns, Michael looked at his daughter's notebook, filled with careful observations about cultural communication styles, emotional undertones, and implied meanings. You're creating a cultural translation guide, Victoria said in amazement. Sort of, Emma said. I'm trying to help future translators understand hearts, not just words. Victoria's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Brazil. She answered on speaker. Senior Martinez, we were just discussing the project expansion. Victoria, I have Isabella here with me. We heard about Emma's medical situation. Our entire team wants to contribute to her treatment fund. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Senior Martinez, that's very kind, but… No. Martinez interrupted gently. Emma, you saved our birds, our water, our communities. Isabella calculated that your cultural insights prevented environmental damage that would have cost $50 million to repair. Isabella's voice came through the speaker, accented but clear. Emma, you understood my papa's heart and my scientific concerns. You are family to us now. Michael watched his daughter struggle with emotions too big for her small frame. I have to go to Switzerland for treatment, Emma said softly. But I've been working on something to help other translators understand your cultural meanings the way I do. Emma, Isabella said excitedly. You are teaching others to read hearts like you do? I'm trying to. Martinez spoke in rapid Portuguese to Isabella, then addressed Emma. We would be honored to help you complete this cultural guide before you leave. Isabella can provide scientific and cultural context from our perspective. Victoria looked at Michael questioningly. 5 days, Michael said finally. We can work intensively for 5 days, then leave for Switzerland. Emma smiled, the first genuine smile Michael had seen from her all week. Senior Martinez, could you and Isabella help me make sure other translators will understand when someone is being polite but concerned? Like when you worry about timelines but don't want to seem disrespectful? Emma, we will help you create the most comprehensive cultural guide ever written, and when you are healthy and strong again, you must come visit us in Brazil. Isabella wants to show you the birds you saved. As the call ended, Michael realized his daughter had found a way to save both her project and her life. But more than that, she'd created something that would help people understand each other long after she was gone. The thought terrified him more than he could admit. The next 5 days blurred together in a frenzy of intensive work. Victoria had converted a small conference room into Emma's personal workspace, complete with comfortable seating, good lighting, and a direct video link to Brazil. Despite her deteriorating condition, Emma worked with fierce determination, documenting every cultural nuance she'd discovered. Michael barely left her side, watching helplessly as his daughter pushed through episodes of confusion and disorientation to complete what she'd started. When Senior Martinez pauses before answering technical questions, Emma dictated to Victoria's assistant, it usually means he's thinking about how to explain something without making the Americans feel criticized. Isabella appeared on the video screen from Brazil, her enthusiasm infectious despite the early morning hour in São Paulo. Emma, you are creating something revolutionary, Isabella said in careful English. Universities will study your cultural bridge-building methods. Emma smiled weakly from her chair, wrapped in the soft blanket Victoria had brought from home. I just want to make sure people understand each other. Michael's phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Hoffman in Switzerland. Flight arrangements confirmed. Treatment begins Monday morning. Emma's neural pathways show promising responsiveness in preliminary scans. 3 days. They had 3 days to finish the cultural guide and get to Switzerland. Daddy, Emma said softly during a break. What if the treatment doesn't work? Michael's throat constricted. It will work, sweetheart, it has to. But what if it doesn't? Will you make sure the water project gets finished? Will you make sure Senior Martinez knows I tried my best? Victoria, who had been reviewing documents at the far end of the room, looked up with tears in her eyes. Emma, Victoria said, walking over to kneel beside her chair, you've already done more than anyone could have asked. The Brazilian team calls you Nossa Pequena Professora, our little teacher. Emma's eyes brightened. They gave me a nickname? Isabella's whole family talks about you at dinner. You've become part of their story. That evening, as Emma slept fitfully on the couch in Victoria's office, Michael and Victoria sat in the darkness, watching the city lights twinkle below. I've arranged for the best pediatric neurologist in Zurich to consult on Emma's case, Victoria said quietly, and I've established a fund to cover any additional treatments she might need. Michael turned to look at her. Why are you doing all this? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. My brother Thomas was diagnosed with a rare genetic condition when he was Emma's age. We had money, the best doctors, experimental treatments. But Thomas wasn't strong enough to fight like Emma is. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Emma reminds me of everything Thomas could have been if he'd had her courage and determination. Helping her feels like honoring his memory. Michael reached over and squeezed Victoria's hand. Thomas would be proud of what you're doing. On the video screen, which had been left open to Brazil, Martinez's voice came through softly. Emma? Are you there, little teacher? Emma stirred on the couch and sat up slowly. Senior Martinez? It's nighttime here. I know, querida. Isabella and I wanted to show you something before you leave for Switzerland. The camera panned to show dozens of people gathered in what appeared to be a community center. Children held signs with messages in Portuguese and English. Adults smiled and waved at the camera. This is the village that will receive the first water purification system, Martinez explained. Everyone wanted to thank you. A little girl about Emma's age stepped forward and spoke in Portuguese. Isabella translated. She says her name is Maria, named for my sister who died. She wants Emma to know that because of her work, no child in their village will die from bad water. Emma started crying. not from sadness but from overwhelming emotion. "Tell Maria I hope she grows up healthy and strong," Emma whispered. As the Brazilian connection ended, Victoria made a decision that would change everything. "Michael, I'm coming to Switzerland with you." Michael stared at her. "You can't leave your company for weeks. I can run Ashford Enterprises from anywhere in the world." But Emma might need advocates in Switzerland, people who understand what she's accomplished and why her recovery matters to more than just your family. Emma looked up at Victoria with wonder. "You would really come with us?" "Sweetheart," Victoria said, "you've taught me that some things are more important than business deals." The flight to Zurich stretched endlessly before them. Emma dozed fitfully against Michael's shoulder, while Victoria worked on her laptop, coordinating the Brazilian project remotely. The cultural guide Emma had created was already being implemented by a team of international translators. "Isabella sent this," Victoria said, showing Michael her screen. "The environmental protection measures Emma identified have been adopted as the standard model for all future water projects in Brazil." Michael looked at his sleeping daughter, amazed that this small girl had influenced international infrastructure policy. Halfway through the flight, Emma woke up disoriented and frightened. "Daddy, where are we? I can't remember." Michael's heart clenched. The episodes were getting worse, happening more frequently. "We're going to Switzerland, sweetheart. To the doctors who are going to help you feel better." Emma nodded slowly, then looked at Victoria with confusion. "Why is the lady with the pretty shoes here?" Victoria's face went pale. Emma had forgotten who she was. "I'm Victoria, remember? We worked together on the water project for Senior Martinez." Emma's expression cleared gradually. "Oh, Victoria. I'm sorry, my brain gets confused sometimes." Victoria reached over and took Emma's hand. "It's okay, sweetheart. That's why we're going to get you help." Dr. Hoffman met them at the Zurich clinic, a state-of-the-art facility nestled in the Swiss Alps. She was younger than Michael had expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and an immediate warmth that put Emma at ease. "Emma," Dr. Hoffman said in lightly accented English, "I've been reading about your translation work. Quite remarkable for someone your age." Emma smiled shyly. "I just listen to people's hearts." Dr. Hoffman showed them to a comfortable suite that looked more like a hotel room than a medical facility. "We believe healing happens better in pleasant environments." The initial tests took 2 days. Michael watched through observation windows as Emma underwent brain scans, cognitive assessments, and neurological evaluations. Each test confirmed what they already knew. The condition was progressing rapidly. "The neural pathway damage is significant," Dr. Hoffman explained during their consultation. "But Emma's language centers show unusual resilience. Her ability to process complex cultural and emotional information may actually be related to how her brain has adapted to the neurological changes." Victoria leaned forward. "Are you saying her translation abilities are connected to her condition?" "Possibly. Sometimes neurological conditions can create enhanced abilities in specific areas. Emma's brain may have developed extraordinary pattern recognition capabilities as it learned to work around the damaged pathways." Michael felt a chill. "Does that mean treating the condition might affect her abilities?" Dr. Hoffman was quiet for a moment. "It's possible. The treatment focuses on stabilizing and repairing neural pathways. In some cases, this can reduce both the negative symptoms and any enhanced abilities." That evening, Emma sat by the window of their suite, looking out at the snow-capped mountains. "Daddy, if the treatment makes me normal, will I still be able to help people like Senior Martinez?" Michael sat beside her, struggling with an impossible choice: his daughter's health versus her extraordinary gift. "Sweetheart, the most important thing is that you get better. But what if being normal means I can't understand hearts anymore?" Victoria, who had been quietly reading in the corner, looked up. "Emma, you'll always be able to understand hearts. That's not just about your brain, that's about who you are as a person." Emma considered this. "Senior Martinez sent me a message today. He said the water project is working perfectly, and Isabella's birds are safe. He said I should focus on getting well because the world needs more people who can build bridges between hearts." Michael hugged his daughter close, realizing that whatever happened with the treatment, Emma had already changed the world in ways that couldn't be measured. "Dr. Hoffman," Emma said suddenly, "when you help my brain, could you make sure I don't forget Senior Martinez and Isabella and Victoria?" Dr. Hoffman smiled. "Emma, the memories you've made and the love you've shared, those are stored in parts of your brain that this condition can't touch." The treatment began on a crisp Monday morning. Emma was brave as Dr. Hoffman explained the process. A series of targeted neural stimulations designed to rebuild damaged pathways while preserving healthy brain function. It will take 3 weeks, Dr. Hoffman said. Some days will be easier than others. Michael and Victoria took turns staying with Emma during the long sessions. The treatment was painless but exhausting, leaving Emma drowsy and sometimes confused. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. Emma woke up from a treatment session speaking fluent German. "Guten Morgen, Papa," she said cheerfully, then looked confused. "Why did I say that? I don't know German." Dr. Hoffman was fascinated. The neural stimulation may be activating dormant language centers. This is quite extraordinary. Over the following days, Emma demonstrated momentary fluency in French, Italian, and even Mandarin, languages she'd never studied. But more concerning, she began forgetting recent memories while retaining older ones with perfect clarity. "I remember every word Senior Martinez said during our first video call," Emma told Victoria during week 2. "But I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning." Victoria had been coordinating the Brazilian water project from Emma's hospital room, and the updates were encouraging. The first facility was operational and providing clean water to 15,000 people, but Emma seemed detached from these developments, as if they belonged to someone else's life. "The memory issues should stabilize once we complete the treatment," Dr. Hoffman assured Michael. "Her brain is reorganizing itself. Some temporary confusion is normal." But Michael could see that Emma was changing in ways that went beyond memory. Her extraordinary empathy, the ability to read emotional undertones and cultural nuances, seemed to be fading. When Isabella called to thank Emma for her work, Emma listened politely but didn't seem to understand why this Brazilian woman was crying with gratitude. "She seems nice," Emma said after the call ended, "but I don't remember working with her." Victoria looked devastated. The vibrant, intuitive child who had bridged cultural gaps and saved international deals was disappearing, replaced by a polite but ordinary 8-year-old. "Dr. Hoffman," Michael said during a private consultation, "we need to discuss whether to continue the treatment." "The neurological damage is stabilizing," Dr. Hoffman replied, "but you're right to be concerned about the personality changes. This is uncharted territory." That night, Emma had her first clear episode in weeks. For 2 hours, she was completely herself again, remembering Victoria, asking about Senior Martinez, worrying about the water project. "Daddy," she said lucidly, "I feel like I'm disappearing. Like the part of me that could help people is going away." Michael's heart broke. "Sweetheart, you're getting better. The doctors say, but what if getting better means losing who I am?" Victoria, who had been sitting quietly in the corner, came over to Emma's bed. "Emma, whatever happens with the treatment, you've already changed the world. The water project will help hundreds of thousands of people. The cultural guide you created is being used by international organizations. You've built something that will last." Emma smiled weakly. "But will I remember building it?" The question hung in the air like a prayer, unanswered and heartbreaking. Hoffman entered the room with Emma's latest brain scans. "I have news," she said. "The treatment is working, but we've reached a critical decision point." Dr. Hoffman spread the brain scans across the table like tarot cards revealing an uncertain future. The colorful images showed Emma's neural pathways in intricate detail, some areas bright with renewed activity, others still dark with damage. "The neurological deterioration has stopped completely," Dr. Hoffman explained. "But we've discovered something unexpected. Emma's enhanced language and cultural processing abilities aren't just connected to her condition. They're dependent on the same neural pathways that were being damaged." Michael stared at the scans, trying to understand. "What are you saying?" "If we complete the treatment, Emma will be neurologically healthy. Her memory issues will resolve, her confusion will end, and she'll develop normally. But," Victoria finished the sentence, "she'll lose her extraordinary abilities." "Most likely, yes. The neural networks that allowed her to process cultural nuances and emotional undertones with such sophistication will be normalized." Emma, who had been listening quietly from her hospital bed, spoke up with unusual clarity. "So I can be healthy and normal? Or I can stay sick but keep helping people?" Dr. Hoffman knelt beside Emma's bed. "It's not quite that simple, sweetheart. Without continued treatment, your condition will eventually progress. But we could potentially maintain your current level of function for several years." Michael felt like he was drowning. How could he choose between his daughter's health and her identity? "What would several years mean?" Victoria asked. Emma could continue her translation work, probably for 3 to 5 years before the neurological damage became unmanageable. After that, Dr. Hoffman didn't finish the sentence. Emma was quiet for a long moment. then looked at her father with eyes that seemed far too old for her 8 years. "Daddy, how many people did we help with the water project?" "The Brazilian government says eventually it could be 500,000 people." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "And Senior Martinez said other countries want to use our cultural guide for their own projects?" Victoria answered, 12 countries have requested copies. "The United Nations is considering adopting your methodology for international development projects." Emma smiled, the first genuine smile Michael had seen from her in days. "I want to help more people," she said simply. "If I only have a few years to do it, I want them to be good years." Michael's world tilted. "Emma, sweetheart, you don't understand what you're saying." "Yes, I do, Daddy. I understand that some people are meant to do important things even if they can't do them for very long." Dr. Hoffman looked uncomfortable. "This is not a decision that should be made quickly. Perhaps we should pause the treatment and take time to consider." "No," Emma interrupted with surprising firmness. "I've been thinking about this for days, during the times when my brain works clearly. I want to stop the treatment." Victoria's face went pale. "Emma, you could have a normal life. You could go to school, make friends, grow up healthy. But I wouldn't be me anymore," Emma said. "The me that can understand hearts and help people build bridges. That me would be gone." Michael felt tears streaming down his face. "But you could live, Emma. You could have decades of life." Emma reached for his hand. "Daddy, you taught me that life isn't about how long you live but about how much love you share while you're here. I want to share as much love as I can." The room fell silent except for the soft beeping of medical equipment. "Doctor," Hoffman finally spoke, "if this is truly Emma's choice, we can design a maintenance protocol that will preserve her current function for as long as possible." "It is my choice," Emma said confidently, "and I want to go home. I want to finish what we started." Michael looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not a sick child making an impossible decision, but a young woman who understood herself and her purpose with startling clarity. "Okay," he whispered. "We'll go home." Victoria was crying openly now. "Emma, are you sure?" Emma smiled at her. "Victoria, you lost your brother Thomas when he was my age. But what if he had lived just long enough to do something amazing? Something that helped thousands of people? Wouldn't that have been a good life?" Victoria couldn't speak, but she nodded through her tears. "Then let's go home and do something amazing." They returned to Portland 3 days later. Emma seemed more like herself with each mile they traveled away from the Swiss clinic. By the time they reached Victoria's office, she was asking detailed questions about the Brazilian project and requesting updates on the cultural guide implementation. "Senior Martinez wants to introduce you to the President of Brazil," Victoria announced, pulling up her email. "They're planning a ceremony to honor your contribution to their national infrastructure program." Emma's eyes sparkled with excitement. "Could we do a video call? I want to see how the water system is working." The call was arranged for that afternoon. When Martinez appeared on screen, his face lit up with joy. "Nossa pequena professora, you look much better." "I feel better," Emma said honestly. "The doctors helped stabilize my condition. I can keep working with you for a while longer." Isabella joined the call, her excitement infectious. "Emma, I have wonderful news. The birds you saved, the rare ibises, they've had babies. 3 healthy chicks nesting safely away from the water facility." Emma clapped her hands with delight. "That's the best news ever." Martinez grew more serious. "Emma, we have received requests from Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. They want to implement water projects using your cultural integration methods. Would you be willing to help?" Michael watched his daughter consider this request. 3 more countries meant thousands more people with access to clean water. It also meant months of intensive work that might accelerate her condition's progression. "Yes," Emma said without hesitation. "But I'll need help. I want to train other translators to understand cultural hearts the way I do." Victoria leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Emma pulled out a notebook she'd been working on during their flight home. "I've been writing down everything I learned in Switzerland. Not just about the treatment, but about how my brain processes language and emotions. I want to create a training program." She opened the notebook, revealing pages of detailed observations and methodologies. "If I can teach other people to read between the lines, to understand when someone is being polite but worried, or when they're testing whether you respect their culture, then my work can continue even after." She didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Dr. Hoffman had estimated that Emma had 3 to 5 years of stable function. Emma was planning to use every moment of that time to multiply her impact. "I want to create an academy," Emma continued. a place where translators and international workers can learn to build bridges between cultures. Not just language bridges, but heart bridges. Victoria stared at her in amazement. Emma, that's an incredible vision. The Emma Thompson Cultural Bridge Academy, Michael said softly, testing how the name sounded. Emma beamed. Do you think it could really work? Martinez spoke up from the video screen. Emma, if you create such an academy, Brazil will be the first to send students. Isabella wants to be your first graduate student. Isabella nodded enthusiastically. I want to learn to read hearts like you do, Emma. Not just for engineering projects, but for helping people understand each other. Over the following hours, they outlined an ambitious plan. Victoria would provide funding and facilities. Martinez and Isabella would help develop the curriculum from the Brazilian perspective. Emma would document her methodologies and train the first cohort of students. We'll start with a pilot program, Victoria said. 6 months, 12 students from different cultural backgrounds, focusing on international development projects. Emma was practically vibrating with excitement. And we'll have real projects to work on, so students can practice with actual communities that need help. Michael realized his daughter had transformed her diagnosis into a mission. Instead of mourning the time she might not have, she was determined to make the time she did have count for as much as possible. When can we start? Emma asked. Victoria smiled. How about Monday? As the Brazilian call ended and they began planning in earnest, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not hope that Emma would live forever, but hope that her life, however long it lasted, would be extraordinary. 6 months later, the Emma Thompson Cultural Bridge Academy occupied the entire 3rd floor of the Ashford Enterprises building. 12 students from 11 countries worked with Emma to develop revolutionary methods for cross-cultural communication. Emma, now 9 years old, sat at the head of a conference table, leading a discussion about their latest project, a water purification system for rural communities in Colombia. Remember, she told her students, when people pause before answering technical questions, they're usually thinking about cultural implications, not just engineering solutions. Maria Santos, a translator from Ecuador, raised her hand. But how do we know if the pause means concern or just careful consideration? Emma smiled, the same bright smile that had charmed Senior Martinez a year ago, though Michael noticed it tired her more quickly now. Listen to what they say after the pause, Emma explained. If they mention family, tradition, or community impact, they're probably worried about cultural disruption. If they jump straight to technical details, they're just being thorough. The Academy had already consulted on 15 international projects across 8 countries. Emma's students were carrying her methods to refugee camps, infrastructure projects, and development programs around the world. Victoria entered the classroom with a special visitor, Dr. Martinez himself, who had flown in from Brazil for the Academy's first graduation ceremony. Professora Emma, Martinez said warmly, I have news from Colombia. Your students' cultural assessments prevented a major conflict between engineers and indigenous leaders. The water project is proceeding with full community support. Emma's face glowed with pride, not for herself, but for her students. That's what happens when people understand each other's hearts, she said simply. Michael watched from the doorway, marveling at what his daughter had built. The Academy had a waiting list of over 200 applicants. The UN had officially adopted Emma's methodologies for all development projects. Most importantly, her students were carrying her gift into the world, multiplying her impact far beyond what she could have achieved alone. After the formal ceremony, Emma sat quietly in Victoria's office looking out at the Portland skyline. Her latest medical tests showed the expected progression of her condition, but she remained remarkably stable. Daddy, she said thoughtfully, do you remember when I was little and used to worry about not being special enough? Michael sat beside her. You are always special, sweetheart. I know that now, but I mean special in a way that helps people. She paused, watching clouds drift over the city. I think maybe some people are meant to burn brightly instead of burning long. Victoria joined them at the window. Emma, you've created something that will help people for generations. Your academy students are already training other translators. Your methods are being taught in universities. Emma nodded contentedly. Senior Martinez told me something yesterday. He said his daughter Isabella is getting married next month and she wants to name her first daughter Emma. Can you imagine? There might be a little Brazilian Emma learning to build bridges between hearts. Michael felt his throat tighten with emotion. And Maria from Ecuador is starting her own cultural academy in Quito, Emma continued. And James from Nigeria wants to use our methods to help resolve tribal conflicts. She turned to face them both, her expression peaceful and determined. I think this is what I was supposed to do with my time. Not just translate words, but teach people to translate hearts. 6 months later, Emma Thompson peacefully passed away in her sleep, surrounded by family and students who had become family. She was 9 years and 8 months old. The Emma Thompson Cultural Bridge Academy continued her work, eventually expanding to 12 countries. The Brazilian water project she helped launch provided clean water to over 3 million people. Her cultural integration methodologies were adopted by international organizations worldwide. But perhaps Emma's greatest legacy was simpler. She taught the world that understanding hearts matters as much as understanding words, and that even the smallest bridges can connect the largest dreams. In São Paulo, a baby girl named Emma Isabella Martinez learned her first words in 3 languages, already showing signs of her namesake's gift for bringing people together. And in Portland, Michael Thompson kept his daughter's notebook on his desk, reminding himself daily that life is measured not in years, but in the love we share and the bridges we build between hearts. The water still flows, the bridges still stand, and somewhere, hearts still connect across the spaces between languages, cultures, and dreams. Emma's light had burned bright enough to kindle countless others.